Hello, my name is Josh Beckett, and I am an academic coach in our case office. So today we're going to be going over overcoming test anxiety. So I know that's something that most students do experience to some degree, and at different points, maybe it's heightened compared to other points of the semester, or maybe some certain semesters you're experiencing test anxiety more. So definitely something we want to go over. And so let's begin. So first, just kind of wanted to go over what test anxiety is. So, a stress response to the threat of an academic test. And just important to note that this can occur before the exam, during the exam, or after the testing situation. And so some people may experience, different levels of test anxiety during these different periods. For some people, maybe they're only feeling anxious before the exam. But then once they're in the exam, they're fine. For other people, maybe, they're not really feeling anxious going into the exam, but as soon as they get to that testing environment, they're feeling kind of those heightened levels of anxiety. So for every student, they're going to experience this differently. Um, like I was saying, some level of test anxiety is very common. So 99% of students have reported at least some moments of test anxiety. But the really big thing I do want to highlight is that it has been found that there is that the correlation between test anxiety and your performance, so the outcome, test anxiety has a little to no impact on your test performance. Meaning that if you are experiencing test anxiety, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fail the exam. So I think kind of previously, a lot of people kind of maybe had this notion that I'm feeling really anxious about this exam. That definitely means that I'm going to fail the exam. And that's not necessarily the case. So kind of wanted to go into some strategies for kind of studying for the exam. So just really quickly, kind of, the way you want to study for a test is to pretend that you're taking the test. Um, so the more that you can kind of put yourself in that testing environment can really help you to kind of practice kind of what happens when you are feeling kind of stressed or anxious during an exam. So um, a lot of the times we're kind of feeling stressed or anxious for an exam just because we're not as prepared as we'd like to be. Um, so ways to kind of improve that can be using flashcards, practice tests, um, so kind of creating your own practice test. For flashcards, it can be kind of like the stoplight method where, you make a bunch of flashcards of maybe definitions or things, putting, if you know them, say you get them right, you put them in the green pile. So you got that. You don't have to keep going over it. Say you get it wrong, that goes into the red pile. And then that yellow pile might be things that, maybe you did get right, but you weren't really sure, or you want to go over again, or you just kind of guessed and got it right, but you kind of want to learn more about why it is that they were correct. Um, Another ways can be kind of reading a paragraph in your textbook and then writing down everything you remember without notes. So just kind of ways to test yourself on that information. Explaining concepts to other people or to the wall or anyone that will listen. A study group would be great for that. And right before the exam, you just want to make sure that you're kind of getting plenty of rest, eating healthy, exercising. There's different ways of practicing mindfulness or some kind of deep or slow breathing techniques. So just kind of finding ways to kind of ground yourself and um, kind of slowing down your thinking, as well as positive affirmations, which will show in a few. During the exam, just kind of looking ahead to see how many points each section is worth, and reviewing the test layout. This does vary depending on the test and how it's set up, but if you are able to see that there's 50 questions, then you can kind of assume that um, you know each question might be worth 2 points. That might look a little different if some of them are long answers or things like that. But, sometimes just kind of knowing how the test is set up and kind of scanning that ahead of time will really help you to kind of maybe not feel as anxious because now you kind of know what to expect. Um, Making sure to use all the time available to you, double checking answers and reviewing work. So usually students that are very anxious in a testing environment or about an exam don't use all the time that is given to them, just because they're kind of feeling really anxious in that moment, and so they want to get out as soon as they can because they just want this experience to be over. Um, and so that's totally valid, but you do want to make sure that you're using all the time available to you and double checking your answers. When you are double checking your answers, though, you do want to make sure that if you are changing any of your answers, that you're really slowing down and thinking about why you want to double check, why you want to change your answers and double check everything. Because sometimes we were right the first time, but we kind of go back and change our answers kind of in a moment of panic. And so just kind of want to slow that down and really kind of have a conversation with yourself in that exam moment of, if I'm changing this, why do I feel like my first answer was wrong? Um, like I said, if you do kind of know how many questions there are for this exam, you can kind of plan out how much time you have per question by dividing out the time by question. So, if there's 60 questions and there's 1 hour, then you have about a question per minute. So that can kind of help you to kind of keep track of your own time. Usually students that are kind of experiencing test anxiety, they might be really stressed about the timed aspect of the exam and maybe running out of time. And so this is kind of a way to kind of keep track of your own time. Um, and then marking problems on exams that are challenging so that you can go back to them. Again, if this is applicable to the exam, some exams you can't do this, but sometimes that's a way to just kind of, circle all the questions that you want to come back to. If you can get through, 55 out of the 60 questions on the exam, then, it's going to make you feel a lot better that, you just have to go back and work on those last 5. After the exam, definitely spend some time reflecting on how the exam went. Um, should I have started with certain sections? Should I do the test in a certain order? So for me personally, I like to um, do the easiest part of the exams first because then I get a lot of it out of the way, and then I just have to focus on the harder ones. But for other people, maybe that looks different. Um, Reflect on how anxious you felt during the exam and maybe how that would have impacted you. Um, so, do you feel like you were super anxious and that kind of hindered your performance, or, were you really anxious, but you actually did pretty well? And so maybe that can kind of help you feel like, okay, maybe it's okay that I'm feeling anxious, right? So a lot of these kind of feelings of anxiety during exams, they're very rational, right? So, um, you know, we're nervous or anxious because we want to do well in our exams, because we want good grades and a great GPA so that we can do X, Y, and Z. So these feelings are very rational. Definitely reflect on, did you study enough and did you study effectively? So not just did you study enough time, but um, were the ways in which you were studying effective? And then just make sure to reward yourself for all the hard work. College is not easy, so definitely make sure to take some time to slow down and give yourself some grace there. Um, this kind of post-test reflection activity can be a great way for you to kind of think about, um, so looking at your most recent exams and the grades you received, maybe kind of rating how anxious you felt on a level of 1 to 10. And then kind of thinking about, how did I prepare for that exam? And maybe what I would do for the next exam. And so again, maybe this is a way to kind of help see, maybe I was feeling really anxious for that exam, but I did end up with an A. And so then I can kind of look and see, okay, what did I do for that exam to feel really confident? Oh, okay, I studied a week before the exam, I met with a tutor, etc. So then from there, I know that meeting with the tutor or studying a week in advance is a skill that I need to keep doing. Positive affirmations can be really helpful, especially during the test environment. So, just kind of telling yourself these things in your head, I can do hard things. Just something as simple as that, just to kind of remind yourself in those moments when you're feeling really anxious that, I have studied hard this semester, I'm smart and capable. Um, and then some more tips. So this is for students that are procrastinating while studying. Procrastinating studying will temporarily ease the stress, but it will make your anxiety worse. So try to study at least 1 week in advance and incorporate those self-testing strategies. So things like flashcards, practice tests that we went over a little earlier. And you can always meet with your academic coach and we can go over some of these as well. Do you have a planned schedule for test day? So, something that we also kind of touched upon was this idea of behavioral rehearsal. So, try practicing the testing day. So, eat the breakfast you plan to eat, do the same commute, go sit in the test room and complete a practice test. This will give you an idea of what that day will be like. And so, if you can kind of, practice this on a Monday and then you know that you have the exam the next day, then it kind of is like, okay, I just did that today. It's not going to be too much different from what I'm going to actually have to do for the actual testing day. Are you worried about the time aspect of the exam? So my recommendation would be, like I said, kind of spend a minute at the start of the exam, calculating the amount of time for the exam divided by the amount of questions so that you kind of know how much time you have for each question. Um, when you're kind of studying, you can also do practice tests and practice timing yourself. This will kind of help feel more comfortable in a timed environment. So when you are studying, creating a practice test for yourself, and then if you know that the exam is an hour, set a timer on your phone, and kind of practice being uncomfortable in that testing environment, in that timed environment as well. Are you worried about the format of the test? So sometimes you can reach out to the professor, one of our tutors through our ULN, through the case, or upper class students, just to kind of gain perspectives on how the exam may be set up. If it's a standardized exam, so something like the HESI, for example, most testing organizations will post kind of how their testing system works and what questions to expect. Same with like nursing students with the T's. There are practice tests for that. So there are definitely lots of resources for some of those standardized exams. Are you worried you will forget everything during the exam? So this is super common. Um, you can kind of try to implement some memory techniques and repetitive recitation into your study plan. Um, and so if this is a paper test, maybe write down everything that you're afraid of forgetting so that it just kind of takes some stress off of your brain. Um, if there's like 7, classes of drugs you're trying to remember. See if you can kind of create like an acronym in your head. So like say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, say all the classes start with that letter. Maybe it's an easy way to kind of remember those. Do you experience physical symptoms during tests? So that's super common. So, this can be things like tension in our body, like we're like really, kind of tense. We're like clenching our fists and things. It can be kind of sweating. It can be a million different things. But what I would recommend is just practicing some deep breathing exercises during those stressful times and just kind of taking a minute to regather your thoughts. Like I mentioned, usually we're not super pressed for time during exams. Like we go in thinking we are, but usually we kind of finish early. Um, so kind of just taking a moment to think, yeah, and trying to find where that tension is in your body and maybe practice just kind of releasing that tension. Are you worried if someone finishes before you? Just a reminder that if someone does finish before you, that doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. Everyone takes different amount of time, so it's really important to focus on your own test, and this can be a great time to practice some of those positive affirmations. Have you performed poorly on tests in the past? I always just say that remember that every test taking attempt is a fresh start. So dwelling on those past failures will not help you move forward. Instead, list out, the questions you got wrong and spend some time after the exam, kind of working to learn that information so that moving forward, you know all the information you need for the following exams. So that's what we have for today. Definitely happy to discuss this more in an academic coaching meeting. So you can always meet with any of our academic coaches to kind of talk through some test anxiety that you may be feeling. And so we do have appointments you can make all semester long. So definitely let us know if you need anything. And if you do have questions, please email case@mcphs.edu. Thank you.